live?
We are live.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Slam, the podcast that reviews every single DC comic book superhero ever. I'm your co-host, Michael, and as always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking another look at some of Superman's origins.
Yes, most of the characters we review on this podcast, we can go, from the beginning in the 1940s all the way to the modern day, and sometimes we can do them in just 3 comics, but obviously characters like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, they have so many rebooted, revised, revamped origins, and Superman probably has more than anyone. And one of the reasons his origin kept getting revamped is because they kept moving the beginning of his career further and further back in his lifetime, making him younger and younger, right? So in our very first, I think it was our first episode, no, our third episode, we talked about how, at first he became Superman as an adult, and then years later they introduced, I think it was 1945, they introduced Superboy, which made him get the costume and the powers maybe as a, 13, 14-year-old. And now we're going to find out that at some point DC decided to give him his super suit at a much younger age. But but there's also going to be other changes we're going to talk about. But first, Josh, I just want to know, were you aware of Superbaby before we did this week's episode?
No, I was not. Maybe as like a one-off concept, but I didn't realize it was this like larger thing where it was an ongoing story and like a weird retcon that they've changed his origin, so he was Superman way early on. It's ridiculous. I thought it was kind of ridiculous with Superboy.
Sure.
But I get it, like you want to bring in maybe an even younger crowd. Not that Superman can't be for young kids as well. But the Superbaby thing seems just kind of ridiculous.
So, and the thing is I think the way that it can work for DC is that if they kept everything separate and its own continuity, it wouldn't matter. Because, like, for example, even right now, today, we have a Superman movie coming out. We had last year the League of Super Pets. We had a Krypton cartoon. There's really nothing wrong with there being a Superbaby cartoon or a Superbaby comic book for younger audiences or even for older. But the point is that to try and reconcile it with Superboy and Superman, that's where things start to fall apart, right?
Right.
But before we get to that, we are going to talk about Superman Volume 1, number 61 from November 1949. And the reason this one is important is because this is something I didn't even realize until I was much older. But in the old comics, Superman didn't even know that where he got his superpowers from until, 11 years into his comic book career. Like, nowadays, that is unheard of. So, you're a kid and you're reading Superman comics week in and week out, and you know more about Superman's origin than he does, which is shocking, right? Because they would never do that now. But so in this story, this is actually the third story in a comic book from 1949. The first Superman story is the Pranksters radio program, followed by the courtship of the 3 Lois Lanes. And the last story, the one we're going to talk about, is Superman's return to Krypton, written by Bill Finger, co-creator of Batman, and drawn by Al Plastino. I believe he's the co-creator of Supergirl. And so in this story, basically, hold on a sec here. Yeah. So we're starting off with a beautiful splash page of Superman. I mean, a bit of a melodramatic expression on his face, but reacting to the explosion of Krypton. And, it's actually very important that the writers point out everyone knows that Superman came from another planet, Krypton, blah, blah, blah. But yes, we have known that, but naturally Superman has not. But now in this sensational story of a baffling crime, the Man of Tomorrow unwittingly tracks down his past. Yes, it finally happens when Superman returns to Krypton. So then we flip over, and to be honest, I really didn't know anything about this issue, and I didn't realize how long the story takes to get to the, I guess you could say, the meat of it, the stuff that we really want to see. But we start off with kind of just a typical Superman story where Perry White sends Lois Lane on an assignment to investigate a fortune teller named Swami Riva. And Clark Kent's kind of listening in with his super hearing, and he decides that he's going to follow her just to make sure she stays out of trouble, right? So right away, this guy, Swami Riva, suspects that Lois Lane, he finds out that she's a reporter, and so he suspects that she's just there to kind of disprove him and expose him as a fraud, right? So, of course, Superman rescues her. But as he's intervening in this situation, he finds himself depowered for some reason, like as if that, because what he says is that he's going to throw a hex on him, and it actually works, which shocks Superman. He ends up losing his powers, and so the assumption is, well, this Swami Riva guy must be the real deal. He must be a real he must have real magic, right? Access to some kind of magic. So then the next couple pages is Superman basically trying to figure out what happened. And so the big thing about this story is that they're scared that the criminal underworld is going to find out that Superman has been depowered. And so, oh no, what's going to happen to the Metropolis if everyone finds that out? And so right away he calls some of his buddies, and they find out that that he's able to depower Superman, right? And so sorry, I'm just so everyone knows here, this is an experimental format we're working on here. Josh is flipping ahead, and I'm kind of following what Josh is doing, so we might be a little bit out of sync.
Yeah,
but,
if you also need me to move to another page or something, just let me know, and I can quickly shift through or whatever. Sure.
And just so everyone knows, we're on original page 5 if you'd like to follow along at home. And so anyway, so Superman confronts another gang of hooligans, and even as a reader, I'm thinking, oh well, obviously they're going to find out now that this is all a sham and it's not working. And then but no, he still gets hexed, and so he's trying to figure out what's going on, right? And then we see that because the criminals know that Superman has lost his powers, there's basically this crime wave all throughout Metropolis, right? And so they decide to start ransoming people, and there's nothing Superman can do to stop him. And so he's like, and I actually love the scene when Superman's sitting on top of this like chimney, and he's like, there's just no such thing as a hex. That's just a superstition. So if it isn't a hex, it must be something else, possibly some strange form of hypnosis. I'm going to check on Swami Riva. And so every story is a mystery, so Superman starts investigating this crime and trying to figure out what's going on. And he finds out that Swami Riva has like this jewel in his turban. Because he actually is kind of like tracking down people that have a connection with Swami Riva. And he finds out that he bought a jewel from this pawn shop, and there's another piece of the jewel still left there. And so Superman, this is where the science fiction becomes a little bit warped, but he looks at just flip back.
Oh yeah, sure.
Josh, no problem. So he's scanning this thing, and then he's like, he's like, one thing I can't understand, why those stones affect me but not anyone else. I'll have Peters show me exactly where he found those stones. So Peters is the collector that originally got the rock. So Superman flies out and meets this guy Peters, who looks like he's got like a pickaxe, and he's like exploring somewhere. And he's like, oh, I think they're meteorites. He's like, meteorites? Okay. So then Superman's like, well, starting from where the meteorites landed and traveling backward in time, I'll chart the meteor's course back to their origin. So he starts flying again. Like, none of us know how time travel works, but it's certainly not like this. So Superman almost becomes a ghost and starts traveling back in time, finding the origin of the rock. Were you gonna say something, Joe?
Yeah, he races at cosmic velocity, passing the speed of light, years in instants. So it's like his being, his soul almost has traveled faster than the speed of light. So he's kind of arrived back in time before his body, I guess, could kind of catch up in some weird, strange way.
Yeah, and so we see, I love this depiction of Krypton where it's like a globe, but it has continents on it that are wildly impossible as far as like the depth that they are sticking in the planet, but whatever. So
it has no atmosphere.
Right, yeah. He arrives at a planet far outside our solar system, and he sees some people walking, and we actually see a couple, and the guy looks what we think of, a more modern reader thinks of as Jor-El, because he's got the green and yellow costume. But it turns out actually the next guy that he runs across is Jor-El, because he sees him walking and he says, that man, he looks more like me than I do myself. Kind of an odd way of putting it. But we see a guy wearing a really cool, in my opinion, Kryptonian costume with a circle and a little planet with rings around it and a headband. And then so we follow him along, and we see, turns out it's Jor-El talking to Lara. And basically, we get the classic Superman origin of him explaining to Lara how he tried to explain to the Kryptonian Council about the coming destruction of Krypton. They don't believe him, so they take a baby and they put it in this rocket ship. And then Superman's like, the death of a world. He sees Krypton exploding. I wonder if this infant will survive. I've got to know. So now we're flipping ahead. He follows the rocket down in his ghostly form. And by the way, that's explained by the narrator that they can't see him. And this scene is right out of, not action number 1, but one of the early origins that reviewed in episode 3. We see the rocket crash and ignite on fire just like it does in Adventures of Superman episode 1, the TV show, just like in the comics. And we see the elderly couple talk about how they're going to adopt the baby and they're going to name him Clark Kent. And the ghostly Superman looks on and he's like, oh, that's me. That infant is me back in the past. So this is my favorite panel. Now I understand why I'm different from Earthmen. I'm not really from Earth at all. I'm from another planet, the planet Jor-El called Krypton. So this 11 years in is where Superman realizes he's an alien. It's a great scene. So I actually thought, oh, maybe the story's over. But no, they still have to wrap up the Swami. What's his name again?
Yes.
Swami Riva?
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah.
So he gets back to the present and figures out what's going on. So then he confronts the hooligans from the earlier in the story. And then he's like laughing at them. They're trying to. Oh, Swami was trying to use his hex.
Right, because he uses his power to blow the turban off of his head before he gets close. So that way the kryptonite is at the bottom of the ocean at this point.
Right,
so
at the river, lake, whatever.
Yeah, and Swami thinks he doesn't realize that it's the kryptonite on his turban that's causing it. He really does believe that he put a hex on Superman. So they're confused as to why he's laughing, even Swami himself. Right.
And so he's laughing. And then Superman, so then he defeats these guys, but then he goes back and he goes back
to the gem store. And he buys up the rest of those gems, and he has them shipped to this like waterfront address. And this weird like sailor man answers the door and tells the kid to leave the package at the table. And then off screen, we are told that Superman undresses out of his like old sailor man costume. Right, it was him the whole time, I guess. And he's got a lever set up that opens up into the bottom of the harbor there, and the kryptonite, all of the kryptonite is now at the bottom of the ocean or the river or whatever.
Yeah, and so there you go. And then I love this little part at the end, because then Superman's like, somewhere out in trackless space, there must be more particles of kryptonite. I hope none falls to Earth again. Perhaps it may never happen, but perhaps it may. And of course, we know it did. And that's the end. And I must say, I really did like the story, not just because of the revelation, but because of the story itself about the hex and everything. It's written like a classic story, a mystery that has a solution, even just that last little panel that I just read, the fact that he calls it trackless space, like these Golden Age writers and these Silver Age writers are great. I love this stuff. What do you think of it, Josh?
Yeah, the writing is surprisingly good in this one. I was expecting not to like this a whole lot because I do appreciate his origin currently, and how with like the Fortress of Solitude and like his father being like an AI projection talking to him and kind of like still having that father figure there.
Sure.
So I wasn't sure how this was going to play out or if I was going to enjoy it much, but surprisingly, it's a pretty interesting science fiction-y way to tell Superman his origin. And so he is aware that as a baby, he was from this planet and how he got there and why this strange rock is weak to him or makes him weak. So,
right.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by it.
You know what's funny is that I mean, there's been so many versions of Superman's origin that I actually don't like the current, like the current one's okay, but I actually don't like the AI Jor-El. I really think if he's dead, he should stay dead. And I don't like keeping the Kents alive either. And so I would actually rather see Superman return to something more like this, where he really didn't have any idea what was going on. Maybe not this far into his career. Maybe, you know, it's always nice when he finds out either from Jonathan Kent or maybe after Jonathan Kent dies. That's kind of the time that he learns his true origins. But I like the idea of him being more alone and not having so much help from this supposedly destroyed world where, oh yeah, Krypton, you know, is gone. However, you have an AI version of your father. Oh, and by the way, there's 23 Phantom Zone villains. Oh, and by the way, there's a bottle city of Kandor, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so there's all these other survivors. So I kind of do prefer this more. But it's from a different time for sure.
Right.
Now, before we go forward, for those out there that are watching this live, you'll notice that my video is completely out of sync with my audio.
Yeah, it's kind of...
anything we can do about that, or should we just...
I'm not sure. I'm worried that what it might be is that I'm sharing the photos that are on screen, so I don't know if that's slowing Skype down. But
I'm also recording it. Should I stop recording it on Skype? Will
maybe that would help. Yeah.
Okay, let me try that. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. No, it's still out of sync.
No, it seems pretty out of sync still, yeah.
Okay, well, as long as our viewers can tolerate me being out of sync, then I guess we should just keep going, right?
Yeah, I guess you could always try the old unplug it and plug it back in and see if that helps.
That old trick? Okay, let me just try this, folks. If you can just be patient for a minute. Okay, testing. Hold on. Hello, testing. 1, 2, 3. That's better. It's about a half a second out, but...
yeah, it might also, like, start getting slower and slower. Yeah.
Yeah, it's already getting worse. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue on, and I don't know, maybe...
you know what? I have one more option, Josh. I have another browser open with all the comic books. Should I quit out of that? And just
you might as well. Yeah.
Let's try that. Okay, hold on a sec here. Okay. Force quit. Okay. Test. Not still out of sync.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll just continue as we are. Then.
Okay.
How's that? Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So I'm just going to change my view and then we'll jump back into it. Oh, and now I guess, so that's all I have to say. You know what? Okay, I'm going to insert a little story right here.
Oh, yeah.
I have been rereading I've been rereading all of my Bronze Age comics. Now I've jumped to Silver Age. Jack Kirby is my favorite artist, and I do like Stan Lee's writing. I think he's actually really good at dialogue, and I think his dialogue for Spider-Man and The Thing is better than anyone else that came after him. I've had a really hard time reading Silver Age Marvel, but I had no problems reading and enjoying these Golden Age Superman stories. Now, I've always loved Golden Age and Silver Age Superman, but I've been worried recently that I'm going to grow as jaded with these as I am with Silver Age Marvel, but it hasn't happened yet. And I actually am one of the people that has never fallen for that, I don't want to say belief, but that kind of cliche that DC was out of touch and whatever, out of step with the public in the 1960s, and that's why Marvel was able to come in and kind of knock them out of the number one spot and blah blah blah. I'm rereading these stories and I love them. I mean, there's a lot of silliness in Silver Age DC, but I think this is great. Overall, did you like the tone of this story?
Yeah, it is. I think maybe the difference is this feels timeless, almost old fashioned, and I think that's kind of why it's still like the story is still impactful and is better when it's up against other comics from Marvel from the same time. Sure. Because I think Marvel has consistently, for better or worse, stayed kind of current with all of their characters and really updated them, where a lot of DC characters and even the places that they are feel timeless, right? Like Metropolis can stay Metropolis and Gotham City can stay Gotham City no matter the time. But Spider-Man in New York, if a kid is picking that up on the stands, it's got to be New York when he's picking that up on the stands. So it's got to kind of, I think, both in tone and the world around it, kind of update. So this can be kind of this like time bottle, I guess, all of these stories, right?
The other thing too, and we should point out, this is 1949, 50, 51. It's still 11 years or 10 years before Kirby and Lee's Fantastic Four. But I think the other difference is that this is a script written by a writer who planned out every plot twist, every line of dialogue. Then he submitted it to an artist, and the artist drew it. Mm-hmm. In the Marvel method, as detailed by both Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they would bat around a plot over a phone or maybe in person for however long that took, verbally. Then the artist would not only draw it, the artist would plot the story. Like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko would plot the story, and then they'd hand it back to Stan Lee, and Stan Lee called it doing a crossword puzzle where he would be filling in the dialogue but also trying to figure out what the story was based on what the images were, and he'd smooth it out and he'd add and he'd pepper it with new stuff. But it was plotted out by a combination of the writer and artist, but then the final plot was done by the artist, and then the writer, like I said, tweaked it and added the dialogue. Mm-hmm. But that's completely different from what this is. This is a script finished, handed to an artist who then finishes it. And I think that's why this holds together better as a story than a typical 60s Marvel comic. So
yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, we'll get back to that as we go. But sorry,
that's how most media is made, and it's tried and true method. It works.
It's not the closest model I can think of is it's almost like the Marvel method is like live music, where you're just making it up as you go along, and
jazz.
Maybe someone, yes, live jazz, right? So, or maybe later, but then the fact that someone comes along and can fix it up later, you can't really change what's there. You can just maybe remix it, and you're adding another part on top of it, but you can't really change the structure that's there. But anyway, we digress. So now we're going to jump to the next book, which is
Superboy.
Superboy, yes. And
That's
Josh is going to tell us what happens in this one.
So this story is when Superboy was a super baby. So we jump right into the action here as Superman is stopping a bunch of goons over in Smallville, and they get scared and run off the road. And when they do, they hit one of the legs of the water tower, and Superman thinks quick, and he tells everybody to vacate the car, and he crushes it up into this like thin pillar and uses it to support the water tower so it doesn't fall over. Police come, arrest the crooks. Some guy at the local paper is taking pictures, and Clark is able to change back into his civilian clothes, and we see him go back to the farm, and he walks in with like the biggest stack of logs you've probably ever seen, and already by the time he gets home, or I guess that evening, because at this point there's the evening paper, right? and they've already printed this story about how he saved the day. And Ma Kent has clipped out the image from the newspaper, and she's kind of flipping through this photo album that she has, and it's kind of all the times that Clark has done something amazing, like lift an elephant above his head at the circus or save a fairy. He was a guest umpire at the Smallville baseball game. He had to rattle up some cows, and he had the chance to be a real cowboy. And as we're flipping through, we also see this photo from when Clark was just a 1-year-old baby, and he's in his cape and he's lifting up his crib, and Clark kind of questions Ma about it. And this is when Ma and Pa kind of tell him the story of how they found him. So again, we see the rocket crash to Earth. They open it up. It's baby inside. And this is kind of where it starts to be a little bit different, because we actually see all of the moments where Ma and Pa discover every one of his powers. So they end up tying this blanket that he was covered in around his neck, because a lot of the other like scarves and shirts or whatever, they would fall off. So this is the only thing strong enough, I guess, as he's running around to stay on. We see that he has super hearing because he hears Pa Kent in town. We see that he is talking to Ma and Pa as a baby about fire, and he uses his X-ray vision to see that there's a fire in the house, and he actually runs inside and extinguishes the fire with his breath. And they're able to infer from that he has X-ray vision and, whatever. He's able to lift up the fridge because he wants milk. He uses his super strength to crush an iron train set, which turns into molten metal because of how abruptly he crushes it. And not only are they able to see his super strength there, but they also see that he is like impervious to any damage. So then they start telling about another story where he is being babysat while Ma and Pa go into town, and he looks outside and he sees this street light, and he decides to like rip it out of the ground. And in doing so, he actually drops it and causes a car to screech off of the road and crash and outrun these crooks. And they run up to Superman and they grab him, and they run into a nearby house where a woman faints. Luckily for them, she was the only one in the house, so they're kind of able to stay there and use Superboy, baby Clark, as a hostage. But they don't know that he has these superpowers. So they are able to, or he is able to see that the diamonds are stolen and that they're keeping it in the coat pocket. He quickly grabs them, and they're unable to stretch out his hands to grab the diamonds because of his super strength. It takes all three of them, and still they're not able to do it. He sees a diamond on one of the guy's fingers, and he tries to grab that as well, but he ends up like snapping the finger of this guy, and this is enough of a distraction for the cops to come in. But unfortunately, the guy that's holding him does have a gun, and he tries to fire it at the cops, but Superboy puts his hand over the gun as it fires and stops the bullet from hitting anybody. And the police are able to save the day. Ma and Pa show up again. The police officers kind of thinking this is super strange that how this all happened, not sure what's going on. And of course, they fix the street light before they go home. And we kind of get this small little moment of Clark and Ma Kent saying, yeah, we knew that you were a super boy or a super baby, and it's great to see you as a super boy, and we can't wait to see you grow up into a Superman.
Yes. Okay, before we say anything,
Sure.
we just want to point out this is written by, again, Bill Finger, and it's drawn by Curt Swan. Now, earlier I said Jack Kirby's my favorite artist. Curt Swan's probably my second favorite. I love Curt Swan. Other than the bizarre-looking baby face of Superbaby, Alfred E. Newman, I love the art in this issue. But I also love this. I really enjoyed it. It's absurd that he becomes super like a crime fighter at such a young age.
Right.
And trust me, things get weirder as this series goes on with Superbaby. But I just thought this was another enjoyable issue. And we talked about how this was written by Bill Finger and handed over to an artist. Just the fact that it wraps up everything at the end with him going back and putting back the light post, and it's a complete story. And I really liked it. What did you think?
Yeah, it's a little goofy. I think knowing that it's Superman is what makes it a little bit more goofy in my mind, because it's like this strange retcon that they've decided to put in just for like marketing. Everybody loves Superman. Let's make him Superbaby. But the story itself is pretty fun. It has kind of like a slapstick Looney Tunes, like kids angle to it, which is fun. Yeah. But it also has like an actual structure to it. I'm really happy that this story is only a couple of pages and not a full comic. I think it being like a short little vignette is kind of nice. But yeah, it's okay.
Well, and to be fair, every Superman story was a short vignette at this point, because they were all maybe 12 pages or less. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but it's okay. I didn't love it, but it was a fun read.
Now, what did you think of the art by Curt Swan?
It was pretty rough in some I think maybe it's just because Superbaby looks terrifying. All of the faces are just so bizarre and so strange. I think this Superboy here looks like little baby Nixon more than Superboy. Yes, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
it's so weird. So I think maybe on a whole it's fine, but it has some bizarre moments.
The thing is this is probably the oldest Curt Swan art I've ever seen, and it's definitely a little bit more primitive than I'm used to from him, but I can still see him there. He's just such a good artist, and yeah, he had a few kinks to work out, but even at this early stage, other than Superbaby's face, I think the art's great. I really like it. There's an inker on here I've honestly never heard of named, let's see, his name is John Fischetti. I've never heard of him, but so this is, in the early days, this is before Mort Weisinger was the editor of Superman, so this is very early, like we said, May 1950. So it was still it's still 12 years into Superman's career, but there's still a lot of development to come, so. But yeah. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but guess what? It's only been the second new origin in 2 years. Now a year later, they revised his origin again, okay? In Action Comics number 158, in a story called Superman, the Kid from Krypton. Right. This one, for some reason, has an uncredited writer. I don't know why, but the pencils are by Wayne Boring, who was at this point, the main artist of Superman for I don't know how long. We'll say 10 years. We'll say 15 years. I don't know. But in this issue, basically we get a slightly revised origin of Superman's origin again. And we see a little intro to the story. And it's again focusing on kryptonite. Why can these fragments from a long-dead world render Superman helpless? The answer goes back to the origin of Superman when he was the kid from Krypton. And we're going to both kind of summarize this one.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay. So, we'll just go page by page. How about that? So basically we open up and we've got some scientists looking through a, what's it called? A telescope.
Telescope.
Yeah. And they see a big meteor rushing towards Earth. And I actually misread this to say that the meteor was coming towards Smallville, but it's coming towards Smithville. And so then we cut over to the Daily Planet, and they are learning that Smithville has been warned to evacuate. So Superman goes to investigate, and when he gets there, he sees the meteor coming down. But as it's coming down, he says, "Feel helpless, groggy. This whole meteor must be of pure kryptonite. Its rays have paralyzed me. I'm unable to move. It'll hit the town, and I can do nothing." And that's the end of that. And then on the next page, what happens, Josh?
Yeah, and then it goes right into talking about where this meteor came from. So
Flashes back,
yeah, we're actually talking about the origin of this meteor now. And once again, we see kind of the same retelling of Superman's origin. Jor-El is trying to warn the people of Krypton about the radiation in the planet, and it's going to explode. They don't know what to do. They see that buildings are starting to collapse, so they put baby Clark into the rocket, and they ship him off to Earth as Krypton explodes. Ma and Pa see him, grab him. We see Pa Kent's death, and then we kind of see that we cut back to this origin of, it's not even really exactly the origin that we just read, but it's kind of like recapping that now all of these fragments of Krypton called kryptonite that are on Earth make Superman weak and take away his powers. So yeah, just kind of refreshing the readers, I guess, about his whole origin and the idea of kryptonite. So
I can jump back in if you want.
Yeah, sure.
If you want to break. Yeah, okay. So basically, Superman's like, well, I fell outside its influence. I'm reviving, but it'll hit the town in a moment. So now he's trying to figure out what to do. So then he gets the idea to pick up a giant boulder and throw it at the meteorite, and it knocks it off of its course and then saves the town, right? And then basically the meteor crashes back down into Smithville, but outside the town. So everyone's fine, right? And so then we cut over and we see that a truck has come along with a bunch of guys, and they're picking up this meteorite, and they've got some sinister motivations. They're gonna try and use it for nefarious means, right? And so then as they're driving along, they're like, "This kryptonite powder I just pounded up from a bit of the meteor will discourage him," because Superman's chasing after him. But it's kind of funny because Wayne Boring likes to draw Superman running in the air. It's a really strange motif he had. I don't know if you noticed that there. But then Superman actually inhales the dust, and he's overwhelmed by it, and he gets knocked down because of it. But then he gets this idea. He visits a Smithville factory. They're like, "After the way you saved our town, you can borrow anything you need. Thanks. With these remote-controlled robots, I'll be able to handle kryptonite without going near it."
So
and
dumb.
again, glorious, because these robots just happen to
I'll
be
just
built
go to the Smithville robot factory, of course.
I love it. Okay, so then what happens next, Josh?
So he uses these remote control robots to grab all of the remaining bits of kryptonite kind of around the area, and we cut over to these bad guys. They're starting to put together this syndicate called the Krypton Syndicate, and they are taking little pieces of the meteorite, and they're actually dispersing it around town to a bunch of criminals, so that way they are safe from Superman. And we see this happening as Clark is coming out of the Daily Planet, and Lois is kind of like looking at these guys with kryptonite, and she knows what it is. Like, that's so weird. I'm not afraid of Superman with kryptonite. Or they're like overhearing them talking about how they're not afraid of Superman with kryptonite in their pocket. And as they drive away, Clark actually gets weak, and he kind of stumbles and grabs a pipe to ready himself. And Lois is like, that's so strange. kryptonite only affects Superman. So that means maybe you're... And then Clark's like, no. There's actually just this gas leak from this pipe. And that it just briefly made me woozy. And he kind of thinks in his head, like, who saw that coming and pierced that pipe with my finger as I grabbed hold to make an alibi. So that's pretty cool. So he now has a device that actually detects kryptonite. And he sees that it's kind of everywhere. So he reprograms these robots to want to collect kryptonite. And this scares the bad guys. And they start throwing their kryptonite pieces at them because they don't want to be attacked by these robots. So over time, Clark is slowly able to collect all of these remaining pieces via the robots. And the only thing left to do now is to get the giant chunk that the crime bosses have collected. So he tracks it down to this seemingly abandoned building in the middle of a farming area, rural area, and he goes over to this shed. And he realizes that it's over there, so he comes up with this idea. We see him fly back with this weird, like, crate attached to his back, and he starts digging down into the ground. And the bad guys are kind of like, this big dum-dum, he's gonna fall right into our trap. We want him to try and go underneath us, I guess, to defeat us, so we can roll the boulder into the hole that he digs. So we see them start to roll this thing as it kind of tumbles down into the hole where Superman is. But Superman is prepared because in his crate on his back is the most powerful explosions he could possibly find, which will not damage him, but will cause the meteor to shoot back up into space, essentially. So he quickly rounds up these bad guys, and we see that he commands the robots to tie this gigantic rope to the end of a rock, and he uses that as a sling to hurl the rock back into outer space. And the comic actually just like abruptly ends here on this page, as Superman is hurling this back into orbit.
Very weird the way it ends. I skipped ahead to the next page, but I didn't realize the story ended. Yeah, it's kind of weird, eh? And we should say, and he says, and may no more of it ever come to Earth from the scattered remnants of perished Krypton.
Right.
But obviously it did.
Of course.
But you know what? Again, I think we have a clever way to get. I mean, granted, the robots is ridiculous, but I think we talked about this on our episode with Adam last week. It's like, the fact that he can just kind of just be moseying along and just come across some robots that can help him, I don't mind that at all. But his solution to the problem is pretty clever, I think. And I really do like the story. What did you think of it, Josh?
I don't mind the robots throughout the story. It's just strange, I think, how he obtains the robots, because it's like in a panel. It's not even like he's like, how am I gonna do this, and he's like searching around trying to find something. He is attacked by the kryptonite, he's coughing up the dust, and then in the next panel he's like, don't worry, I talked to some dudes and they let me borrow their cool robots. Like, there was no like development of that, and it's so strange. Even if maybe there's like a character or something that he saves from the meteorite or something, that's like, I'm actually this guy, and if you ever need anything, he's like, well, you might actually be able to help me out now, and then that's it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's a little like abrupt and strange, even for it being this like campy, goofy comic. But other than that, I think it's pretty good. I also appreciate how quickly we get the origin, and it's also kind of nice to see a little bit more of Jor-El in the origin, and kind of talking to, because we really, that's mostly done in like one single panel. Like, they won't believe Jor-El. Anyways, the planet's exploding and we got to ship the baby off. So it's kind of nice to see a little bit more of that in Jor-El being almost like a scientist, discovering this and figuring out how to save the day, and still nobody's believing him. So it's a little bit, it feels more plausible that he knows this, I guess.
Also, we should point out Jor-El's costume is different yet again, right? I mean, not to say it has to be the same, but I mean, you'd think he'd be wearing the same thing every time he is just about to die. But anyway,
it almost looks like a Flash costume. It's so strange.
You're right.
I did like the other one, I think, a little bit better too, because it almost had a Superman feel to it. Like he even had the red underwear on and everything. So,
right.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about, again, these Golden and Silver Age Superman comics where I gotta admit, it's almost hard for me to differentiate between good ones and bad ones, because obviously some of them are standout, but I don't think I read any that I dislike. I like them all to some extent, because especially Curt Swan is my favorite, but I do like Wayne Boring's art, but just the art to me is just so quaint, and I really like the art. But
I love the art in this one.
Yeah,
I think it's my favorite of the three.
It's really good, and Wayne Boring actually gets better later on, but I think it's just the style and the naivete of this time. I just can't not enjoy these Superman comics, and I do also love the Batman comics at this time, but not as much as Superman. There's just something magical about them. I love Superman. So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this. It is surprising that they're revising his origin 3 times in 3 years. Right. And I actually never liked the idea of Lois Lane suspecting the Superman, or the Clark Kent was Superman. I just wish that it never even crossed her mind. That was my least favorite thing about these old comics. But other than
I kind of like Lois being the only one that is kind of putting it together. I feel like it kind of makes them a stronger pairing almost. Like it kind of gives the two of them this like strange dynamic where she's always a little bit suspicious that there is this weird connection between the two, but
see, the reason, I'll tell you why I don't like it, it's because the whole great thing about this dynamic is that Lois is in love with Superman, but is not in love with Clark, but Clark's in love with Lois. As Mark Waid said, it's a love triangle with only 2 people, right? And of course, marrying them off eliminates that, destroys the drama, which is why I hate the marriage. But yeah, so I like the early Golden Age Superman stories where Lois did not suspect he was Superman. So, but that's just me. But yeah, I really did like this story. So, I mean, I can't say anything bad about these old Superman comics. I just love them.
Yeah, this is pretty great.
Yeah, but here's the thing. We think it's over. It's not. There's more Superman revisions coming. So on this podcast, like we said, every episode will be dedicated to usually one DC superhero, but certain characters, we won't spoil who, but you could probably guess, certain characters are going to get more than one episode because there's so many versions of their origins. And Superman is definitely, he has the most. So
Right.
So,
and yeah, I guess too, around this time, you didn't have the resources like you do now to see his origin, kind of see what's going on. So them retelling it every few years at this time made more sense than redoing his origin today.
Right. Agreed. So I guess that's it for this live episode of Slam, right?
Right.
So we should tell everyone, obviously our regularly scheduled programs have been delayed because we will not be releasing any reviews of movies that are produced by DC or Marvel or any other companies that are struck right now. So we are going to be posting the comic reviews, but not the movie reviews. So coming up on the next episode of Slam, I'm actually trying to open it up because I can't remember what our next episode is. But would you like me to reveal it on this live episode, Josh?
Yes.
Okay, so for all you out there that are waiting and with bated breath, the next episode of this show is dedicated to none. Drum roll, please.
Is it
Our Man?
Yeah, everybody's favorite.
Don't get too excited, but yes, it's Our Man. So be sure to join us for that. And for the next episode of Taped Crusaders, we'll be talking about Buck Rogers. So
that's super exciting.
Yeah, and I guess that's it. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening or watching the podcast. Please let us know what you guys think about the comics we're talking about and the movies and whatever we're talking about. You can find all of our stuff over on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. You can also find us on YouTube and Facebook at the same name. Let us know what you guys think about the stuff we're doing. Let's keep that comics conversation going, so keep in touch.
That's right. Until the next time, see you later.
All right. Bye.